Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Well, sorry I haven't made any videos for such a long time, but today we're going to be talking about brushes. So this is a selection of brushes from my brush collection, plus a sponge. So this first one here is a flat, and as you can see it's kind of a chisel shaped brush. This next one is a round, which are my favourites, my personal favourites. This one is a rigger, which has a much longer bristle length to a normal round, and which is used for painting rigging traditionally. This one is a fan, which, as you can guess, its shape denotes its name. This one is called a sword or a sword liner. It has a very pointed tip. And this one is a brush pen, which I did a review of in a past video. And the water is held within the handle of this brush. Now the business end of a brush, the fibres or hair, can be made of various different things. This one here is made from goat hair. This one is synthetic nylon. And this one is Red Sable, Kolinsky Red Sable. The Red Sable is the most expensive bristle and it's the best, but if you're starting out you don't need to invest that much money in them. Now here are various flat brushes or chisel brushes. This one here I use a lot for putting down a wash, so I lay down the water first and then the colour. So that's good for large areas, and that's made by Camel, Winsor & Newton. It's actually a student class. This one is actually an acrylic brush, but I do occasionally use it to lay down washes, not often though. Then there are various different sizes of chisel-shaped brushes. This one was recommended by a teacher of a class I was attending, and it was the only brush she made us get. So we use that brush for everything. So as you can see, when you have a chisel shape, you can lay it flat to make wide marks, or you can use it on end to make points or to do lines. So it is quite versatile. This one here is quite a tough scrubby brush. It's not actually a watercolour brush, but I use it for removing paint, which I'll show you later. And this is just another finer chisel edge brush. This one is a chisel, but it's also got a rounded end. This one is a mop. It's a synthetic fibre. Again, I think it's made by Camel. It's the Camel series of Winsor & Newton, and it's a good beginner's brush. This one is another mop brush, which I occasionally use for making washes, but the fibres do tend to come out from that one because it's a cheaper brush. Now this is the difference between a synthetic and a red sable. If you see the synthetic one on the left, you see it has been shaved to make a point, but it's not a real point, whereas the Kolinsky one comes to a beautiful point. I do use this one quite a lot, this synthetic one, particularly with students, because these two brushes are the same size. Costs are very, very different. You can get the synthetic one for probably around £10–11, whereas the Kolinsky you can pay anything from about £80 to £200. So that's the difference. My one I think cost about £90, the one I have here. The Kolinskys hold much more water or paint. Now these are other rounds which I have in a variety. I have several synthetics, plus I also have Kolinsky's Sable. So this is just a selection. The sable ones do have a beautiful point, whereas the synthetic ones tend to be quite rounded. This one is a Squirrel, and it's a Chinese brush, so it doesn't hold its point as well. This is a comb brush, and it has fibres of two different sorts. So it has nylon fibres at the end and a squirrel or sable in the middle. This one is it's more of a craft brush, but it's a chisel edged with a slant. I wouldn't use that really for watercolour. This one is a SWORDLINER, and you can see, actually I've never used this one, so it's still got its starch on it. When you buy a new brush, it has starch. That's what makes it pointed, and so sometimes you find they're very hard, so you have to wash off the starch. This is a cheap, nasty brush, which shows how they go once you wash off the starch. They are pretty useless, so I really wouldn't buy those. Might look like it's got a lovely point, but it is a horrible brush. Probably made from goat or camel. This one again is a synthetic, as is this one. Now, if you were just starting out, I think synthetic is fine. This is a De La Rowney brush from their student quality range. And I think if you had these 3 size brushes, that's probably a good start with. So you probably want about a 6 or a 7 for the largest, and then a 4 and maybe a 2. This one is very fine. I have quite a few very fine brushes. Brushes go from size 000 upwards to about, I think it's a 16. This is a cheap set, really cheap set. Wouldn't buy this set. I mean, it was very cheap. Great for kids, but that's about it. It's not an artist set. It might say artist brushes, but they're not. They're horrid. So if you want to do a reasonable job at your watercolour, don't buy a really cheap set. Buy one good brush. One good synthetic brush is so much better than a cheap set like this. So that's just done a little wash with them, but they don't hold much paint. This set was going against what I've just said, was £3 from the works, and it isn't that bad. I was quite impressed, really. Synthetic brushes on the whole don't hold as much pigment or water as a good sable brush, but that's one of the things that you pay for. So, you know, you pays your money and takes your choice. But if you're just starting out, a synthetic brush is fine. I also do find that I use sable Kolinskys for my professional work, and I do wear them out quite quickly. So they're expensive and they do wear out. People say they last forever, but I look after my brushes and they still wear out. Now, this is showing what you can do with a fine tipped brush from that range. So reasonable. Brushes are always changing in design, in what their content, fibre content is. And what they're tending to do nowadays is to mix good quality sable with a synthetic fibre, so that you get the paint reservoir, if you like, plus the tip of a good quality sable. Now, I was just using the fan there to do leaves on a tree. And I'm just going to go back in to this drawing and just put some dark low lights into the tree, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. And this is their chisel one. So we just see, I'm just putting some paint on there. If you wanted to lay a big wash, you need a much bigger brush than this. This is not the brush for doing a big wash. I'm just showing you a little one there. Okay, this is another set from the works, which was £2. Has less brushes in it, but we'll give that a try out. Again, these are synthetic brushes. So you can try them out. If you press on the brush, you will release more pigment. If you do a light stroke, then you will have a much finer line. So here you can see I've gone from fine to pale. So your strokes do denote what you can do. I'm just laying a simple cloud sky in here. Put the water on first. I will be showing you how to do skies later on. And I find most interesting is to do cloudy skies, which we get a lot of in England. And then I'm just adding some darker undersides to the clouds. The water is doing most of the work here, not me. And another way of dabbing in paint and just softening off the edges. See, and this is just with a synthetic brush, it's not with an expensive brush or anything. One thing I would say, to really look after your brushes, never ever leave them standing in the water, in your water you're using for mixing paints, because they will curl and you will never ever be able to get that curl out of them. So that is one of my main rules in watercolour, is never leave your brushes in the water, not even for a minute, because you'll get into the habit of doing it. So don't do that. Thanks. If you think about it, all painting is making marks on paper. Whether it's with a brush, a sponge, anything. Or canvas if you're using oils or acrylics, of course. Or you might be painting on wood base. Right, this is the sword liner. So you can see it has great points. It's really good for grass. And this is just to show the difference if you use it on edge with a chisel brush or if you use it flat. So you can make quite a thin mark, or you can make a really thick mark. So they are versatile from that point of view. I don't tend to use them much, but it's just a question of personal preference. And this is just a different size one showing you. It's a bit like in calligraphy where you have a chisel-shaped nib. This is using the comb brush. Sorry, didn't do much with the comb brush there. Now I'm using a rigger brush to make straight line. Rigger brushes were used in the past for rigging, obviously, that's where the name comes from, and they allow you to make a finer line, a longer line. It's easier to manipulate the brush. This is a very fine brush. This, I think, is a 00. And this one is the water pen brush. I use these when I go out and draw out in the field. They're great for that because they have their own water supply. Now, I pointed out about this brush, which is not a watercolour brush, it's an oil brush, but I use it for scrubbing away paint. Once you've done it though, you will have damaged the paper, so you have to be really careful if you want to paint anything else on the top. Please excuse the fact that my voice is going. I'm just getting over COVID. Some paints stain more than others, so some work better than others. This is going back to the Chinese brush, and you can see you can make various different squiggles, and I'm just showing the variety of different size brushes what you can do with them. And here's a very thick number 10, I think, and a flat brush. And this is the SWORDLINER again. So if you push down, you make a thicker line, and when you lift, you make a finer line. And this is the comb brush. So you can see it would be really good for grass. This is my mop brush, and I'm just showing you how you can use that. But I do find that that one does leave hair behind. And this is the sponge. Sponges are great for doing like leaves on trees or stones on a beach. But move them around. Don't use them always in the same angle. And then I just go in afterwards and refine it a little bit with some paint on a normal brush. And let's give it a trunk. Okay, and I'm going to use, this is a natural sponge, but I should have turned it a bit because it's all coming out the same. So if you turn it, then you get different angles. This is a pack of travel brushes which fold up. I think I've speeded that up a bit too quick, but you pull them out and you screw the handle into the ferrule and it makes a longer stem. Right, here we are back with, this is a number 9 synthetic brush, which is a good starter for doing washes. So this one you could probably get for about £8 or £9. I should think it'd be under 10. That's a number 10 brush, which is the one I talked about before. This one I've used for years, and the ferrule, that's the metal bit, is actually loose and it is quite disconcerting when I use it. This is a Kolinsky Sable, but it's actually lost its point a bit. I think, again, it's a case of I've used it too much. When you put it in water, though, the point will come back. This one is a synthetic, chisel edged. It's got a nice handle. So basically a brush is made up of 3 parts. There's the handle or the shaft, the bristles, and the ferrule, which is metal. In this case it isn't metal, it's plastic wound around with metal holding it together. And that one is goat, I think. This one is Squirrel. It's the Chinese brush. It doesn't have a ferrule, so that the bristles are glued in, and then there's a metal piece that kind of grips into them. And it's got a bamboo handle, that one. This one is the brush pen, which holds its own water reservoir in the handle. And as I said before, these are really useful if you're going out and painting on location. The bristles are made of nylon, not particularly good bristles, but for just sketching, they're great. And you press down on the barrel, and that releases the water down into the fibres. This is a thicker one, and this one actually has a button where you press for the water. good for doing a sky wash or something, this one, or the sea. So good for washes. Does have a problem trying to get it back into its holder. This is a cheap nylon one, so dubious quality. These are some sponges that I bought for £1. They're synthetic sponges from again the Works, and this one on the right is a natural sponge. They do make different marks on paper, but each has its place. Right, this shows the different sets: round brushes, flat brushes and specialist brush. I hope you've enjoyed this video and you'll join me next time when I'll be talking about paint. Till then, happy painting. Bye!